My name is Jacob Gunderson, and for my Middle Ages final project, I will be cooking this beef, leek, and barley stew, which is a form of pottage, using barley as the grain and beef broth as like the water base. At some point between the Middle Ages and now, buying beef bones became more expensive than actually buying beef, so we're just going to be using this stew meat that I found at Walmart. But back in the Middle Ages, most peasants could not afford meat, so they just used the bones to make broth. And that way, that's how they'd season their food, with beef or chicken or even rabbit. So the first step will be to add all this stew beef to the pot. Next, we're going to be adding a little bit of oil just to make sure it cooks. Now, before we add in the broth and water, just to get the meat a little bit more thoroughly cooked, we're going to turn the heat on low and we're going to start browning it a little bit. During this time, we're also going to add in the onions and any other vegetables that must be sauteed. So back in the Middle Ages, they couldn't really adjust the heat like that. You needed to have something called a trammel hook, which could raise and lower the cast iron pot over the fire, and therefore control the amount of heat that was in the pot. So next, we're going to want to add 3 cloves of garlic, an onion, and 3 leeks, which we're going to chop in half and clean thoroughly before we add them in. Now, back in the Middle Ages, you'd probably make your vegetables even more dirty by washing them with the water available, but thanks to our water filtration systems of the modern age, we can clean these very dirty leeks. Now that we have all the leeks thoroughly washed, we're going to cut them into segments, and we're going to use from about here to here, just to ensure that, every bite has flavor. Now that we've chopped up all the leeks, we're going to add them all to the stew. It smells very nice right now, very nice. So next, we're going to chop up and add in 3 cloves of garlic and just 1 onion for now. And that should be the majority of our stew base until it's time to add the spices and other vegetables. Now we're going to add the onions. And then lastly, we will add in the garlic. And then for the spices, we're going to add a little bit of salt. We could add some pepper too. However, most peasants could not afford pepper at all. But since we already have the beef, it'd be a shame to waste such a great spice. Now for the liquids, we're going to add a little bit of wine, cups of beef broth, and then 4 cups of water. All right, so now we're gonna bring this mix here up to a boil, and after that's done, we're gonna bring it down to a simmer and let it sit here for about an hour before we start adding some more stuff. And while the pottage is on its way to a boil, we're gonna add some sage, thyme, and rosemary. Now, as I mentioned earlier, many peasants couldn't afford spices. Even simple ones nowadays, like pepper, were only available to the rich. So they used a lot of herbs like these to season their food. So we're just gonna add a little bit of each of these and wait about an hour for it to boil and simmer. So now that the pottage has been simmering for about an hour, we're going to chop up some carrots, parsnips, and turnips, common peasant foods, and we're going to add those to the pottage. Here's one of the carrots and a parsnip, and then we got the parsnip and another carrot. And finally, we're going to add in the barley, very accessible for peasants, also very good with pottage. The second food we're going to be starting on is called Viking Funeral Bread. We won't need any yeast or sourdough or even beer as they sometimes use because of the yeast in that, because this bread does not need to rise. We'll be using 2 kinds of wheat or flour that are very common to peasants. On one hand, we got the oat flour made from grinding up oats, and on the second hand, we got the rye flour. So the grain mix for the Viking Funeral Bread, I mixed all 3 flours together in about even proportions, 2 tablespoons of flax seeds and 1.5 teaspoons of salt. And now we just have to whisk these together before adding the buttermilk. All right, and now for the liquid, we need to add 3/4 of a cup of buttermilk. I made this by adding regular milk to lemon juice, which makes a very similar chemical reaction. Next up is we have to knead this into a dough with our hands, so I'll get right to that. Alright, here's the dough after about 5 minutes of hand mixing. Now we're just going to knead it for a little bit while longer until it becomes more consistent, and then we can finally take it to the cast iron pan. Alright, so this is the dough after about 20 minutes of kneading. It's pretty, kind of tastes like Play-Doh, but I'm sure that's just what they had to live with in the Middle Ages. It'll be better after it's cooked. Now we're going to turn our attention back to the pottage. Coming together quite nicely. The barley has expanded a lot and it's thickening up. You can see a lot of the ingredients that we added in earlier. So now that it's been simmering for about 2 hours, we're gonna add in some cremini mushrooms. And those come last because they cook faster. So these are the washed cremini mushrooms. We're gonna start off with about 5 of them. Now we just gotta chop them up into largest chunks, rough chop them. Now that we got those creminis chopped up, I'm just gonna slide them right in. And after I mix this up real quick, this pottage should be done within the hour, and in the meantime, we're gonna get back to finishing the Viking Funeral Bread. All right, so now that the dough is pretty kneaded, we're gonna split it out into like about 12 segments and pan them out or press them until they become like, kind of tortilla width. And then after that's done, we're gonna go to the cast iron skillet and cook each of them individually. We're gonna start cooking them on this cast iron skillet. I don't know if the peasants had skillets, but they definitely did have cast iron. Just about 45 seconds to a minute on each side. And then after those are done, the pottage should also be done, and then we can start our sampling. All right, so here we have a few of them ready right now. We have a few of them ready over here. Looking pretty good, tastes a lot better once it's cooked, which is pretty good. Once it's mixed with the pottage or some honey or preserves or whatever they would eat them with, I think it'll be really good.
Great.
All right, so here are the finished products. We got the very charred Viking Funeral Bread and the beef, leek, and, barley pottage. Looking very nice, smells very earthy. I think it'll taste good, but let's see what my roommates have to say. Here's our first victim, Julian Rojas. Let's see what he thinks of our Middle Ages meal. Like if you were like a medieval peasant and this was all you had to eat.
I'd be pretty satisfied with this. I feel like from what I know about the time period, this would be a reward. Pleasantly surprised. My expectations were low going into this, but
That's good.
With modern day seasonings, this could really be something.
That's good, that's good. Thank you, Julian. Here's our second victim, Seth Schimberg. If you were like a medieval peasant, this was the only beef you got this month. Is this a good way to spend it?
This thing slaps.
Actually?
Actually.
Yeah.
Would you give this a thumbs up or thumbs down?
I'd give it 6 shekels.
Victim number 3, my beautiful girlfriend.
Can I eat it?
Yeah.
You know what?
Not bad?
It's actually good.
That's good, that's good.
If I was a peasant, I'd give this like 15 shillings. Man.
Nice. All right, and now it is time for me to try my own meal. Let's get mushrooms, some beef in there. This is pretty good. Tastes very earthy, because of all the vegetables. This turned out the really good consistency. Kind of poured you exactly what I was looking for. What I think we've learned from this is that medieval peasants did not eat like crap. They actually had some taste. And be thankful for the vegetables that you do have access to and spices.